Greetings. I first pay my respects to the people of this land to which I'm a migrant. I'm currently in the stolen land of the Wurundjeri people in the Kulin Nation, this city known as Nam, but now renamed by the colonizers as Melbourne. My name is Heewon Chang. I was born in Tonga and raised in different places, and I'm quite interested in reading the Bible with communities, or reading with the Bible what the struggles of people in their daily lives. I'm really happy to have a team of people who are committed to reading the Bible for different reasons, with whom we will be having this conversation this evening, evening at the time of recording. I'll ask them to introduce themselves and offer kind of opening remarks on relating to what it is that they look for when they read biblical texts. So thank you, Innie.
Yes, I am Inise Vakabua Foi'akau. The surname is Tongan because I'm married to a part Tongan, but I am of Fijian background. I pay respect to the Darug Nation. I'm currently located in Minchinbury, so in the Western Sydney region. I'm trying to get back into studies because of my interest in reading biblical text and having my Fijian or Pacific lens. So when I'm reading the Bible, I try to see if there's any familiarity in terms of where I am now and a person who has migrated from the islands into this land. So I'm always looking for that familiarity. I think I long for that familiarity when I'm reading the Bible, even though I'm confronted with other things when I'm reading. Another thing that I look for is, because my interest is in Old Testament text, I try to look for woman voices, or if I can't find woman voices, if there's anything feminine in the text, because it's a very patriarchal reading mostly. Yeah, so it's migration, it's settlement, it's what else is there? Foreign land, in-betweens. Those are the things that I look for, and it gives me familiarity and knows that God, there's something about God's text that recognizes these things as well. And I'll just end there for now.
Minaka Innie, Heewon.
Hello, hi, my name is Heewon Chang. I am an exit candidate from the Uniting Church. I do know where my placement is, but I haven't signed the terms of placement, so I can't say. But yay. Anyway, so I am, because I think, Sione, you always introduce yourself as a native pastor. I'm a non-native person to this country. So I think when I read the biblical text, I am curious where the natives are. And it's something that significantly changed for me because I am a native to Korea. And when I was reading the text in Korea, I didn't care where the natives were. But coming to this land, and because I am a non-native and because I am a second people to this land, I search where the natives are. So when I open up the Bible, I think the voices or the things or the topics that I look for are the very neglected voices, the people that's not mentioned, the ones who have no name, the bloodied bodies. There's plenty of them in the Old Testament. Yeah, so the really marginalized, the neglected are the stuff that I try to look for. And in a weird way, God is there. And I like to, I don't know whether it's pushing the boundary, but it's, if we say that this is our holy book, then let's just take the whole thing, not just one perspective. Let's not read this as as an account of one nation, but let's look at everyone that's mentioned there. So yeah, I shall
Thanks,
stop
Heewon.
there.
Yeah, and then we have Brian, and we'll come back to a kind of a group conversation on the concerns raised. Brian?
Yes, thank you. I'm Brian Corlea. I'm a second generation Australian born Samoan. For the last 4 years, I've been living and working on Wurundjeri country. But for the last few months, I've been living on Dharawal country, which is the land that I spent my childhood in my teens and my early adult life, which is otherwise known as Campbelltown. But currently I came to a Samoan wedding, and Samoan weddings tend to take up almost 2 weeks due to all the cultural processes that happen. So I'm here on Yugarabal country, otherwise known as Forest Lake here in Brisbane, Queensland. Reading the Bible is something that has changed dramatically for me in the last 10 years. From someone who read very much from a fundamentalist perspective, who believed every single word to be the divine truth, to now being a sort of more of a questioning of ideas and a critical reading per se, not as a way of trying to, but to put it simply, it's to try and re-understand the Bible, if that's an easy way of putting it. Because I felt that now that I reflect back on that life, it's like I read something and I just did not understand anything about it. So as much as it's re-understanding, it's also a decolonizing process. And that's the type of readings, those are the type of readings I'm very much interested in right now. A decolonial ways of looking at the biblical text. And it's very much in line with what Innie and Heewon have mentioned about sort of paying attention to those neglected voices in the text, but also trying to reposition them and relocate them, because in neglecting them, they've been misplaced. They have been buried away. They have been put in places where they shouldn't be because of patriarchy and misogynistic readings of the text. So being a man myself, I am sort of careful in trying to negotiate that because I know that I, in a way, have been responsible for that type of reading. So I do read, and at the same time, I listen to my sisters, or in my Samoan context, I call them my tuawhine, and hear their voices, so that I can hear the tuawhine voices in the biblical text. And yeah, that's a big part of what I'm interested in reading the Bible. But it's not just my tuawhine, but it's also, you know, other voices, whether it's transgender voices, whether it's animal voices, whether it's the earth, the voice of the earth, the voice of the moana, the ocean. Those are all the voices that I'm keen on hearing in the text. So yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, Malo. So maybe we can lead our Talanoa, our conversation, in two directions. The first would be, how would you illustrate what you had just said using a biblical narrative? For example, let's say the narrative, the story of Ruth, this woman who was a Moabite. It started with Naomi. It feels like what Innie had referred to as being a migrant. Naomi and her family moved from Judah to Moab, and Ruth moved from Moab back to Bethlehem. So it's a story of migrants moving back across borders, across lands. Does this story resonate with any in your experience as migrants or non-native looking for natives, or where would you? Who wants to get us going on that? And I think that's a first conversation. Talanoa. The second one is on how to read a biblical text, and let's come back to that one. But did you care? Are you in a place to get us into the migrant part of the Ruth narrative, Innie?
Yeah, you know, we've read Ruth, like I've read Ruth a number of times, right? So migration is as soon as you open the text, migration is sort of like sitting there confronting you, where they left Judah. Elimelech and his sons left Judah with Naomi to come because of the prosperity in the Moab land. And just when I reread it this afternoon, climate refugee just I think dropped the pen on me, kind of thing. So they were going because there was famine in their land, and they were going in search of food, of prosperity. Yeah. So they migrated, and you know the story where they came. They probably farmed, and then the men died. And then there was another remigration story. There's another remigration story. Yes, but this time it was Naomi with her daughter-in-law and the other daughter-in-law going back to her parents' house. It strikes me of like there's quite a big wave of migration from the Pacific Islands at the moment, coming for seasonal work. I know Tongans, Samoans, Fijians, you know, Australia's just opened the door and there's like a big wave, and sort of that's sort of like a migration in this new land here. And maybe after work's done, after Australia says, yeah, you are done, we are done with you now, you know, they will have to be, so we're confronted with this text. They'll have to go back. Does a Naomi then take her Ruth back to the islands? But that was just coming to me as I was rereading the text this afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Innie. Heewon, do you want to jump in?
I think I was just thinking about, because Naomi tells the daughter-in-laws to go back to your mother's home, go back to your motherland. But these two people have been living there for some time, yeah? So then, you know, what does home mean? What does home mean for migrants like me? What does home mean for displaced people? What does home mean for refugees? And you talk about, you know, like Australia is really good at, I think when COVID happened, like they were very quick to say, oh, you know, if you don't have visa and if you don't have money, go back to your country. And it's the same with how you treat the workers that's coming from the Pacific, you know, we will reap your labor, but if you're no good, go back. So yeah, the issue of home and what that means, yeah.
Do you see, Heewon, do you see Ruth as native or non-native, or both, at different parts of the narrative?
She's both. She's both. I mean, to me, she doesn't have a fixed identity, I think. I mean, she's a native and she's a non-native. It depends where her location is. Yeah.
But it's quite interesting that you pick up on how, in terms of the migrant workers here in Australia, how the government will squeeze their energy, but won't, just kind of milk them out. And once they're done, then the government will say, oh, look at what we have done. We have given all this money to these foreigners who have come, but actually the government ends up keeping more than what they take away. But I think that's a longer conversation.
Yeah.
Are they therefore slaves, Brian? Do you see them as like just forms of slavery, or?
Yeah, I actually truly believe that that this is modern day blackbirding and modern day slavery. You know, unfortunately, we live in a country where the Prime Minister is unaware of its slavery roots and its slavery history. I mean, if the Prime Minister was aware of blackbirding in many years ago, he'd be aware of the slavery heritage of these lands, and you know, the experience that I mean, that whole story of natives from Pacifica being ushered in onto boats to come to these lands because they offer them greener pastures, only to live the life of a perpetual slave and not returning home. Some even dying at sea. You know, it's just horrific. And you know, to think of the seasonal workers in this day and age, it's very much the same experience. You know, being sort of persuaded to come to these lands to earn an income that is supposed to be higher than what they could ever possibly earn back on the homelands. And you know, there was this viral pay slip of one of the workers that was being shared on social media, where you know, the person that hired these workers made a significant deductions of their pay, of all these various costs. And, you know, it started off with, you know, I think it was $600 that they earned. And then by the end of all those deductions, they barely had anything to even live off with. I think it was like just a bare cent over $100. And, you know, those are slave-like conditions for these seasonal workers. And, you know, it's so, it's really good to hear that some of these people have come out and spoken about the experience. And, you know, we've seen some of these lawyers that have come out, you know, to work with them, to bring out their cases. You know, it's really good to hear these stories, but there's still a lot of work to do. But the significance of this is that now people are starting to wake up to these slave-like stories that are happening here on these lands, that, you know, all of a sudden we realize that there is this going on. But from reading Ruth, you know, a lot of this actually reminds me of what, you know, the Chinese American biblical scholar Gail Yi wrote about you know, the story of Ruth, where, you know, she says that Ruth is a perpetual foreigner, and it's, you know, she speaks of her own experience as a Chinese American, where, you know, when people come to her and ask her, where are you from? You know, she states where she's from, you know, in terms of where she lives in America and where she grew up, but they still won't know where you really from. They just can't accept her being American. So obviously she has to answer in terms that the colonizers would understand. And she reads from that position, saying that Ruth is very much the same, you know, and it begs the question: who is actually asking her where Ruth is from? Is it the people in the text, or is it the reader? Are we guilty of making Ruth the perpetual foreigner? Which you know, I love what Heewon was saying, that, you know, we can choose, it's up to us to determine whether she's native or not. So therefore the power is in the reader's hands. And when we misuse this power, then we are guilty of what Gail Yi says, of making her a perpetual foreigner. When really, I like to read Ruth in conversation with Ezra, or maybe pushing back at Ezra, who says that Moabite women are, you know, you shouldn't marry them. But Ruth is saying, well, you know, hang on a minute. I'm Moab, I'm Moabite. Without me, you have no history. So, you know, reading Ruth in conversation or as a pushback against Ezra, I think, you know, tends to flip the script there. Using Siona's favorite word there, flip. I think it's an alternative way of reading Ruth that would sort of subvert, you know, the colonial project.
And
But I mean,
go ahead, In.
sorry, no, when I was listening to Brian, the issue of color, I mean, we don't know whether Ruth was black or white or brown.
Yep.
But the issue of color is there in how we treat migrants, you know,
right.
Not white enough, yeah. If the seasonal workers were from Europe, do you think the same thing would have happened to the Pacifica people?
Right.
I don't think so. So the color, the issue of color is definitely there, and I think Ruth, you know, Ruth kind of doesn't say where she, allows us to see that.
Yeah, and it's probably, and going back to the power in the hands of the reader, it's probably the readers that are projecting color onto Ruth.
Yep.
And therefore it becomes a point in making the decision on whether Ruth is a native or not.
So it comes, and that's the second line of conversation that I'd like for us to touch on, the power of the reader, to use what Brian was saying, because it's obvious from our Talanoa, at least so far, that no reader comes as an empty slate, and no reader is innocent. It's what readers are interested in. We all have interests, and we all have baggage, and that influences what we see in the text. So, and it's interesting. I mean, Innie had mentioned that she reread and saw different things today that she didn't see before, and Brian had talked about re-understanding, the re-understanding the biblical text. So it's not only do we come with interest, but we should be open to change our mind. Is that a fair way of to see the color, to see slavery in this particular narrative? What's your thinking on that? What do you think, Innie? What's bothering you?
Yeah, I think it's a shift from seeing this text as just about relationship, you know, a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, or a mother and a daughter, on trust. You know, for me, rereading it shifts from what I would, how I would have read it before, and how these things would have customary obligations. I think it's full loaded in this text as well, and it's shifted. So rereading it has shifted from how I read it before to the conversation that we are having now. Right? Yeah.
And shifting is okay.
And shifting is okay. I think shifting is okay.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to. I guess it's helpful to make up our mind on what the text, how we understand the text, but it's okay to shift as we continue coming back and rereading over and again. So does that mean that we are perpetual something, that we don't quite figure this out, or to use Gail's term, or what are you thinking there, Heewon?
No, I think that's the beauty of the biblical text. We in the church try to control it too much, but if this is the living word, then let it live. You know, it might not say the things that I like, it might not say the things, you know, that I go for, but let it, you know, let it live, let it rip. That's the living word, and I think we need to trust that a bit, that we could resist the text if it doesn't make sense. We struggle with the text. We can give it a different meaning, and that's the beauty of the biblical text, because it talks back to us, and it makes us shift. It makes us look at things that we didn't look at before, and yeah, for me, that's the beauty of this thing that we call the Bible.
Brian, why you're smiling back there?
No, I love what he once said. It's you know, the whole, as an Australian Samoan, you know, I get excited when the things that resonate with those two cultures, when I hear something that excites me. So, you know, hearing the word "let it rip," it's a term that I mean, it's a phrase that I hear a lot, whether it's in the sporting space, or, you know, whether it's in, but there's also the funny space that I'm sure he won. And you know, we've been listening to Ellie's poem as well, and the embarrassment surrounding farting, and, you know, letting it rip speaks to that. So let it fart, I guess. You know, if it's gonna smell, so what? That's you know, we can, I think, we choose the Pacifica approach to when we hear a fart or smell one, is to laugh and you know, and tease and mock. So it's an opportunity to have fun when you're letting it rip. But I like what Heewon is saying as well, because it's a lot of the time when we say to be open-minded, there's always an intention to close it afterwards, and sometimes to say to be open-minded seems more of a cop-out, as opposed to what people are actually doing or should be doing, when they are asked to be open-minded. So to be open-minded for me requires one to be to not have that intention of closure, because we all seek closure in reading, and seeking closure in life might satisfy us, but then it sort of ends the Talanoa, it ends the story, and then that's it. And sometimes I think that having that open-endedness, and I think open-ended can also might need to go in line with open mind, because it raises more questions, but at the same time it continues on the conversation or the Talanoa. And when you read books like and I'm pushing towards books like Jonah and Job, the two Joes. There's a lot of open-endedness at the end, and some of the time, and for those who are sort of that require closure, sometimes not having closure can be a good thing. Sometimes not having the answer is okay. Because we become obsessed at trying to figure things out, but really we should just hold back and reflect more, and then, in the words of Heewon, that's letting it rip. Oh.
For some of the people who will be listening into our Talanoa, our conversation, should ask Ellie Elia to let them watch this part, story, narrative. But I think this has been a great conversation, and we'll try to wind it up now. And I'm going to challenge you with two challenges here. If you were speaking to your own community, this is the first challenge, your own community. How would you help them let the Bible rip, to use Heewon's language, to your own community? How if it's a Fijian or Korean or Samoan community, what do they need to do in order to allow the Bible to rip, to fart? So that's the first question. The second is, how would you encourage people from outside of your community to let the Bible rip on behalf of your community? Yeah, those are the, and if it's if you need more time to think about it, maybe we can have another Talanoa. But how do we do that? Not just think of it as an invitation, as a concept, as a challenge, but actually do it. Whether you deal with referring to the narrative of Ruth or other narrative that you're interested in. So who wants to get us started in just winding things up? Shall we just go in the order we started, with Innie, and then Heewon, and then Brian?
I think the suggestion of the Ruth text allows us to, it allowed me to reread and rip, if that's the word that we're using. And I think in the discussion, in the Talanoa that we've had tonight, we're sort of like ripping some of the normal thinking for me, and getting something else out of it. So if I go back to my congregation, it's easier for me to talk about migration and things like that, because it is real for us, right? Okay, real for us. And it's something that the congregation can understand. However, if you go into the last chapter of Ruth, I won't be able to rip it open to the congregation or allow, because there are other things in it. Sex in the barn. I can't rip it for them there, if you know what I mean. Even though it's an important part of the text, because straight after the sex, the genealogy comes to David. But I think, yeah, some things we can rip, some things I think it is harder, you know, to have conversations with, to have Talanoa with, though the genealogy side is probably, yeah, it's an easier landing. Yeah.
Yeah, Minaka ini, and this is something that we'll need to pick up at another time. So, yes. But Heewon.
I mean, there are two really, I think, difficult questions, and I think for me, because I'm going to go into a congregation ministry pretty soon, I really want to do Bible study together with the people. I really want us to take the Bible really, really seriously, that we consider all of it, not just the readings that we get off from the lectionary, but all of it, you know, all of those terrible texts in the Bible. I really want to invite the people to sit with it and see if it takes them anywhere, because it will take them somewhere. And just not to be afraid. Because I think in the church there's this thing of, oh, is this the right way of, you know, is this being a good Christian? Is this the right way of reading the Bible? There's no such thing as the right way. We all read the Bible differently, and let's just honor that. Let's bring our baggages and read with our baggages. Let's bring our issues and read with our issues. So I think that's one of the things that I will be doing. Did I answer your question?
Oh, you answered more than my question. You answered the next two questions as well. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian? Hello?
Yeah, and this is continuing on from what Innie and Heewon said about the way we, before we even pick up the Bible, is perhaps to try and recondition ourselves. You know, when I'm thinking about this whole the biases that we have when we approach reading the Bible. I mean, you know, Gadamer said that we are historically conditioned to think a certain way, and we can't avoid that. And there is a truth to that. You know, whatever background we come from, whether our life setting will sort of form us in a way to think, and we can't, you know, like I said, we can't avoid that. But what we can do is to sort of maybe recondition ourselves, and we can start by saying that, you know, to not view the Bible as this great textbook that has all the answers, but rather to think of the Bible as a reflection of maybe the ambivalence and the ambiguity of life as we know it. Because, you know, we find, you know, some really conventional stuff that, you know, makes the church really happy to hear. But at the same time, we see things that just don't make sense. We see things that offend. we read things that that are sort of a more carnal and sexual nature, that, you know, is very problematic to read in the context where you have children. And in, you know, Pacifica cultures, we can't read when the sister is present. So there's a lot of taboo if we use the hijacked version of our native word tapu, that's involved in reading the Bible, and maybe we need to lift that. We need to lift that taboo, but replace it with tapu. And, you know, from a Samoan perspective, tapu doesn't emphasize banning or to sort of stop. Tapu emphasize the whole sacredness, or the, you know, the sanctity of relationships, between brother and sister, between fellow humans, between humans and non-humans. And then to end off, I go back to Ini's point about migration, and maybe, you know, we need to think of the text not as these sort of, what's the word, these privileged people who have homes that are set, but to look at it and remind ourselves that it's a migrant story about migrants, and written by migrants. You know, if you sort of take care of the language, whether it's migration through the desert or migration of the Israelite ancestors, you know, right through to the exile, which is, you know, a forced migration. So you have voluntary and forced migration all happening, and these are all the dynamics that migrants are all too familiar with, and diasporic people as well. So to read from that position, we also acknowledge that we are migrants on these lands, and that we are privileged, especially when we have we do so at the expense of indigenous peoples, you know, and that's sort of the way that the privileged reading of the Bible tends to view the Israelite story, for instance, in total neglect of the Canaanites who were already living on those lands. So I think we need to be honest, therefore, in the way we read the Bible, and yeah, I think that'll go a long way to trying to have a more spiritual relationship with the biblical text.
Thank you guys, and thanks to Ellie for this invitation for us to trouble her community, and we look forward to another chance to continue letting things rip and keeping them open-ended. So thank you.